I am delighted to be here today with Helen O'Sullivan, who is an expert in sustainable fashion. She's doing a PhD in sustainable fashion education at the University of Portsmouth and is the Good Life Schools community engagement lead for South Wales. Welcome, Helen.
Hello, thank you for having me. Very, very excited.
That's all right. Because one of the things about, curriculum and trying to engage young people is there's no mention of sustainable fashion unless you're doing textiles further on, maybe, and they might start talking about it. So how would you define, let's get kicked straight off, how do you define sustainable fashion and why does it matter?
Okay, so how long have we got again?
About 25. Yeah, yeah, okay, your PhD, 60,000 words long. No.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's just, well, even the term sustainability, that's a word that kind of really grapples with me because there's not actually, a very clear definition of what it means. But then in the terms of sustainable fashion, what does that even mean? Do we want to sustain the fashion industry as it is at the moment, or is it more about regenerating the fashion industry? So even though I run a campaign called Sustainable Fashion Wales, I still just dislike the word and the term sustainable fashion. I'm doing my PhD in sustainable fashion. But yeah, it's such a difficult topic to kind of cover. It's huge. It's so broad. In terms of looking at the carbon emissions already, I mean, it's estimated between 8 to 10% of global carbon emissions are actually a result of the fashion industry, which is more than aviation and shipping, which is a phenomenal amount. But yeah, it's a topic that's not really explored very much, especially when it comes to not just education, but also government policy, legislation. There are, movements within this area. I've been working in this area since the mid 2000s, and it's great to see people like the European Parliament now reporting and investigating on the impact of textiles. But we've got so much work to do because it's just so complicated. I mean, fashion affects every single one of us on the planet, or clothing in particular, not necessarily fashion. But we all wear clothes, but we have no idea of the impacts that those clothing, have not just on the environment, but also on the people and wildlife as well. So if you're looking at things from everything from the water use, the energy use, the fossil fuels to create synthetic materials, and then the waste of all of that at the end. I mean, I think there's percentages of something like 20% of all clean water is used on the textile industry. And that water then just becomes waste, whether that's been affected by pesticides and cotton growing or the dyeing of materials. There is such a huge, huge impact all across the supply chain. And then what do we do with all of this clothing when we're finished? We just throw it away. So I think it's just got such a capitalist and colonial model that we just take from companies. We use what we want and then we just give it to somebody else to deal with. And I think, that really, really needs to change because there are such huge environmental and ethical challenges with the fashion industry. But unfortunately, most people don't know about it.
But it is getting into the news, and so young people might see that, Next, Primark, I'm going to name names, and Marks and Spencers have got huge piles of clothes, dumped in places like Ghana, and there's American clothes are being dumped in the Atacama Desert, and these are, areas of outstanding natural beauty that are being
Absolutely.
literally dumped with old clothes. I don't even know, I
Yeah.
can't even remember. I think it was 8 billion items of clothing are made each year. Um,
It's crazy, yeah. I mean,
so
I think the last statistic I found was the Cantonmanta market in Ghana. I think it's 15 million items of clothing are sent to that market every single week. And they are labeled dead white man's clothes. But the thing is, they're not actually dead people's clothes anymore. It's just stuff that we just don't want. Traditionally going and buying secondhand clothes, it may have been because somebody has passed away or they just can't fit into it. But now it is literally because people are just buying too much stuff.
yeah.
And it's
No,
it's
it's
just
just too much
phenomenal.
stuff.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, environmental challenges, ethical challenges, failing desperately in terms of the circular economy. So we know that there are issues and we know that it's not necessarily being covered in schools. Some schools are doing amazing things like trash and shows and upcycling. And, there's amazing projects going on in some schools, but so, a limited number. So how, it's important, we know, for teachers to maybe start introducing these ideas to children, because it's about need and want. I don't need that new item of clothing, I just want it, so therefore I don't have to have it. So how can teachers start encouraging students to think critically about their clothing choices?
I think, yeah, the crucial point is to make it fun and engaging, and showing the relevance as well, because I think a lot of the time in a lot of design and technology classrooms or fashion and textiles or sewing when I was younger, I had no interest in sewing in school. When I was in school, I would go home and I would make my clothes and I would customize them. But in school, it just didn't seem relevant to me at all. So I didn't even opt to take it at GCSE myself. And I think that, that is because we're kind of taking the fun out of it. I think also teachers do need to be careful with these topics, because if you're just standing in front of a class talking about the doom and gloom, you're going to either have a result of eco anxiety or even worse, apathy and just not actually caring. So I think, we do need to be really careful as educators how we approach these subjects. And if we can try to make it fun and engaging, then that's great. I mean, I remember one of the best sessions that I've ever done in my school. It was only supposed to be a very short little test thing for Fashion Revolution Day it was. And I did garment worker profiles. So every student had a random garment worker from along this fashion supply chain, and they had to create a profile which was based on, where they live, how much they earn, where do they shop, what kind of phone do they have, and they all basically became that person. And it was just such an amazing experiment, because we had some people who were given the garment worker CEO, who lived in the amazing apartment, had a yacht, and then you had somebody who was maybe a cotton picker or cotton farmer. And the conversations that happened within that classroom were just so incredible, better than I could have ever have taught myself, because they started unionizing. They realized that there was so much exploitation. The farmers were just saying, no, I'm not actually going to grow your cotton anymore until you pay us more money. And it was just such an amazing experience that actually became part of my curriculum then, because it was just, well, I've just done what I wanted to do,
And
but I
yet,
actually didn't do anything.
absolutely teaching about inequality, and it's
Yeah,
just beautifully laid out in the garment industry.
absolutely. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
and it's about
definitely.
having fun, being creative. As I say, there's all sorts of ways that you can do swap shops and
Yeah, yeah,
bringing that
yeah.
awareness and discussions in to make an impact. And so I've worked with schools about recycling, uniform, and then managing to give it away to families who haven't got maybe as much money, so they don't need to buy uniform, because kids don't wear out their clothes so much as just
Yeah,
grow out of them, and so they can continue to
absolutely.
be recycled. Um, so if we're tying in, so in England and in Wales is a little bit better about sustainability, the phrase, than we are. But if we're trying to tie it into subjects like geography and science and design technology, have you, in terms of best practice, there's a start that would link in with any of those. But have you seen wider picture, different curriculum subjects, or best practice in those subjects?
I've worked with quite a lot of primary school teachers, but I think a lot of the time people seem to think, or teachers seem to think, that design and technology or fashion or sustainability in fashion in particular is a completely separate entity. And I think a lot of educators don't realize that you can actually teach the entire curriculum through the fashion supply chain. If you think about it, I mean, what an amazing whole school initiative would that be, to learn about, environmentalism, developing their critical thinking and creativity, and also responsible citizenship, which is one of the pillars of the Welsh curriculum. I mean, you've got so much literacy and numeracy all throughout the fashion industry and all throughout design and technology subjects. I mean, I did develop my own curriculum to try to be as cross-curricular as possible, particularly with the changes in the Welsh curriculum where science and technology are now combined. I don't like that personally, because design has completely gone out of that topic. So will young people actually realize that our designed products are having this impact on the environment if it's just all about technology and science? I think we definitely need to work together, because you could teach science, you could teach about natural and synthetic materials, you could calculate the carbon footprints, you could look at the history of the supply chains and how that links to imperialism. There is so much that you could do with design and technology, but I've yet to see a whole school or very solid way of being able to do that. So I'm hoping that with my own PhD resources that I'm developing, that I will be able to create this pack so primary school teachers can use it and understand how, you can even bring in foreign languages if you want to. You could look at extended producer responsibility in France, or looking at business models. There's so much you can do. So I'm hoping that these resources will better equip primary school teachers, but maybe even secondary as well, to see the possibilities and the importance of keeping design and technology as well. Because I'm probably going off on a tangent, but design and technology is a declining subject. Only, I think there's 20% of schools that are not teaching design and technology anymore. And the ones that do, the numbers that are taking it at GCSE are rapidly declining. And while the GCSE is great for sustainability content, Key Stage 3, Key Stage 1, 2, there's no mention of sustainability, particularly in the English curriculum. I think the word environment is used in the terms or the context of a space
Yeah.
rather than the actual environment. So I think we're just missing the trick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, I know.
There's so many opportunities. I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's like, we can carry on with the status quo and the world will continue to become a worse place for these, for young people, or we can actually try and just address it and change it. And it gives us energy and engages the kids because it makes it relevant yeah. So there's lots of opportunities. Let's talk about this design technology and what exciting innovations or trends are emerging in sustainable fashion. What's going on that you think actually that could be a real hook for people?
There are, well, in terms of things that just general people can just take part of, or that school teachers can easily access, you've got loads of different challenges all through the year that you could kind of bring your curriculum in line with. So things like Secondhand September, there are no new clothes campaigns that are happening. Lots and lots of development in terms of slow fashion as well, and really identifying how long it takes to make our clothes. I think that is such an important aspect of curriculum, and particularly in terms of fashion, because we just assume that something that costs £5 probably didn't take very much time to make, and we don't actually really understand the true cost of our clothes. But in more broad terms, I think there's lots and lots of really exciting research that's happening. So I've recently been involved with the Future Fibres Network Plus. So I was part of the Collabor Academy, where I work with environmental scientists and environmental policy to develop a syllabus for the future. But that's more for the older ages. But, there are lots and lots of really exciting things that are happening through that. I've seen scientists working on bio-based ethical sequins that use nothing but plant-based or ethically sourced mica. There was one research project which was looking at wet spinning, which is using cellulose and plant dyes on a 3D printed machine that you can just make at home or in a classroom to be able to spin your own yarn. I mean, that's just such an incredible
Amazing.
thing. I mean, could
And
you
then
imagine year
getting to
nines would
use
even be
that.
impressed?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's lots and lots of stuff happening, but I think that the aim or the goal of what we need to kind of be working towards is to bring all of that together. And that's what's been so great working with Future Fibres Network, to see all of these exciting, innovative, scientific programs and research projects happening, and how I can actually apply that in education.
Excellent. So, and one of the things I'd really like to see is when I virtually never buy, anything new. This is all secondhand. But if I did buy something new, I'd like to see a label that said carbon impact, water impact, who made it,
Absolutely.
and make it personalized so that I can make an informed choice, because you can say made in Bangladesh or made in Sri
Yeah,
Lanka, but by whom, who, was it fair trade effectively as well? Are the people
absolutely.
getting paid enough? Um,
Yeah.
so the fashion industry is a huge employer. Um, in terms of careers, are there, are you seeing changes in careers? Are there opportunities for young people? If we're talking about green skills for the future, are there roles in the fashion industry for people that care about the environment?
There are, but I think, like most industries at the moment, is the uptake on green jobs for the future is just incredibly slow. I mean, we're teaching students at the moment who or equipping them with skills for jobs that won't exist when they're old enough to be in employment. So I think, there are lots and lots of different career opportunities. I mean, the fashion industry in itself is huge. I mean, people think a fashion designer is the only job that you get in the fashion industry, but it is so vast. So, if you're thinking about in terms of design and production, designers are tending to look at more sustainable materials, and developing less waste from the fashion industry as well, whether that's through zero waste pattern cutting and construction, or just thinking about different ways of creating samples. So there are lots and lots of different careers. In terms of maybe environmental specialisms, there are lots of opportunities for scientists to get involved in the fashion industry, as I just mentioned. But, if you're looking at brands now, I am seeing them advertise things like sustainability officers or ethical compliance managers, because they are being held accountable. So they can't just kind of bury their heads in the sand anymore. And even in terms of marketing, which I know is seen as like the evil industry, but I saw this wonderful presentation by Caris Egan-Wire in the SCORE conference, where she basically just said the climate crisis has a marketing problem. And it does. We focus on the negatives all the time. So why aren't we training young people to become ethical marketers within the fashion industry and celebrate all of the amazing, wonderful things that we can get from a sustainable design aspect? I think we just need to rethink things, and it has just been business as usual up until this point, but it can't continue. So yeah, I can't see why any job within the fashion industry can't incorporate more sustainability.
If I think myself back to when I was in school, and this was decades ago, we were still making, in the UK, we were still making and producing fur coats. And that has stopped. We don't see
Yeah,
that anymore. That is
yeah,
not something that's acceptable. So,
yeah.
as we go forward, it should become not acceptable to have,
Hmm.
not just cruelty to animals, but, cruelty to our planet. If
Yeah.
a company is causing ecocide, some of these big brands are causing huge amounts of problems.
Absolutely.
And it's that the cheap fast fashion is the worst. We need lasting fashion made of sustainable materials that will not harm our environment, that can be used for many years and repaired. My,
Yes.
my husband and I, we patch our jeans and things now, and we use the brightest color fabric so we can draw attention to it, to say
Yeah,
that we patch our clothes because it makes them
absolutely.
long
It's an
lasting.
act of rebellion. I
I know,
love it.
yes, yes. Actually, craftivism is an act of rebellion.
It is totally,
I
totally.
was
I
just
completely agree.
I was just about to ask about resources, but there's a book about craft. I can't even say it now.
Yes,
Craftivism.
craftivism.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's draws attention to this this rebellion of
absolutely. No,
sustainable.
I am here for it. In fact, talking about repair and reuse, I often do presentations at the Women's Institute, and I absolutely love it. So I had a lady who was telling me that she was about 85, maybe 90, and how she was repurposing curtains and bedding and things like that when she was younger. And she made a point of saying it was before the Sound of Music made it fashionable. And I just think, do you know what? We've actually got ourselves into this mess in the last 40 years. Why does it seem so impossible to go back to that?
That joy you
It's
get of when
not.
I've repaired
Yeah,
something and I'm now able to use it again,
absolutely.
or upcycled it or whatever.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And when I was in school, one of my projects was an eco toy, but it wasn't necessarily about the toy itself, or it was more about teaching the repair skills. So every toy had to have a button, so all the students knew how to repair buttons, slip stitches to, you know, fix holes and things like that. Because I would always have some boys coming to me at break time, I've ripped my coat, miss, can you fix it? And I'd say, well, no, actually, you can do it now. And they were really proud to be able to do it.
Yeah. And those, those simple little skills absolutely are, crucial. So if we just go back to basics, those, being able to repair our own clothes, you
Yeah,
know, just to give them that extra lifespan. If you do that time, again and again, then you might not need an extra product in your time. So
absolutely.
just a last question for you, Helen. Are there any resources, books, videos, that you think actually would be really perfect for teaching about, the fashion industry and how we can change it?
So yeah, I mean, there are so many out there. Whether you're looking at whole kind of projects. I mean, I've put all of my teaching resources on the Sust Fash Wales website, so they are available to download for free. So I've got like 20 week projects based on the eco toy that I just mentioned. Also, the garment worker profile activity is on there as well. Projects for upcycling textiles, denim in particular, to make bags, which I would do in my year sevens. So just that, there are
Okay.
loads of
Yeah.
resources. But in terms of my PhD as well, I'm also developing the resources for primary. So I'm hoping that that will be a big pack of resources which involve cartoons, but also activity sheets. And also in terms of my role as a Good Life Schools community engagement lead, we're developing amazing resources that we're hoping all schools will be able to take part in over the next couple of years, which really address that negative impact on people and planet, and the root cause being consumerism. And if you look at that from a fashion point of view, it's massive, isn't it? So yeah, there's loads and loads of stuff out there. But yeah.
Fantastic. What a lovely chat. I know I could absolutely talk to you all day about this and about, life in general. Helen, you are a wonder, and in terms of knowledge, and that, we need people like you and so we're lifting your voice, and hopefully this will encourage some teachers out there to embrace the fact that sustainable fashion is fashion industry is such a damaging industry, but there are ways forward and resources out there that
Absolutely.
they can use. Thank you so much for your chat. I'm going to end the recording. Hold on.